So Black Adam is the latest DC Comics movie about a anti-hero who exists within the DCEU. Now, that might not be like such a big stretch, like an anti-hero in the DCEU after we've seen what they've done with like Superman and Batman and even the more recent editions of like Birds of Prey and the Suicide Squad. Oh great, another anti-hero. But here's the thing, like Black Adam I think has like an interesting character dynamic that is much, in comparison to like the previous PG-13 DCEU films. I think this film sets its goals a lot smaller, which I think work. Like I think it almost becomes like kind of like a mindless action film at times, which kind of is to the benefit of the director Jean-Claude Serra, who's done a lot of big, very fast but very like light on plot action films, which are they're very fast and exciting. And Black Adam is very much that. The problem is that it brings up some interesting ideas and then doesn't really expand on them. Because like the idea of Black Adam is great. The idea of Black Adam is great. Dwayne Johnson, who everyone has been pulling for the longest time from to play Black Adam because it seems like perfect casting, actually does fit this role pretty well. He plays Teth Adam, this man who was wronged during his slave days about 5,000 years ago. Was gifted these wizard powers similar to Shazam, which a little bit of a spoiler, but they don't really mention much of Shazam here, even though there's some direct correlation there. But whatever, I'm fine. Just keep it small, keep it working like this. So he's been in prison for 5,000 years, and when he wakes up, he's not happy that his homeland of Kahndaq is now under the control of Intergang. If you're familiar with DC Comics lore, Intergang, basically this high-powered syndicate that has access to all this advanced technology and weaponry. And so they basically enslave Kahndaq, and so once Black Adam shows up, says, hey, this doesn't look right, and basically goes about slaughtering all of Intergang. And of course, everyone having been living in Kahndaq and having been under this occupation immediately just cheers for him. It's like, yes, please, just shoo away all these Intergang goons who have invaded our homeland. Like on that level, like you have very interesting aspect of shining a light on like imperialism. And then, of course, you have to have Black Adam compete with somebody, because the thing is, Black Adam's very powerful and he's using that power to kill. So obviously some heroes who don't favor killing step in, which kind of makes you question, like, okay, is this still the DCEU? Is this still the world where like there are superheroes who don't want to kill? Is this the same realm as like Batman v Superman and all that? Because it definitely is. Like in the same manner as as Shazam, this film has a lot of like background references, I think, to the rest of like the DC Comics lore, in the way that they would have like kids would have like posters of like Aquaman and Batman and Superman, and they all carry around the comic books and all that. It's that similar staging. But here's the real frustrating thing. First off, I will say this, as a DC Comics fan, I did like seeing the Justice Society play a role in this film. The Justice Society is called upon by Amanda Waller, who apparently Waller has been working with Justice Society this whole time. I don't know why she needed the Task Force X before, if she had the society, but whatever. Like I said, you kind of have to disconnect it from the rest of the DCU, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And believe me, we'll get to all that here. So the Justice Society is called in, and it consists of Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan, Carter Hall, better known as Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, Atom Smasher, played by Noah terrible with names, Noah Centineo, and Sarah Stahl plays Adriana. Sorry, what was her name? Cyclone. Quintessa Swindell plays Cyclone. So you have a decent foursome here. They have like an interesting setup for their dynamic. Dr. Fate's been around for 100 years. He has the great powers of magic and possession. Hawkman, of course, has the ability of flight and all this Thanagarian technology to have a mace that can form like axes and stuff like that. Atom Smasher can grow big, and Cyclone can make tornadoes. And unfortunately, it feels like this film should have breaks. It needs to like slow down so that you can kind of get to know these characters and appreciate them, because it does not slow down one bit for it. Like, don't get me wrong, like, part of me loves seeing, like, Dr. Fate finally on the big screen and doing all this cool magic, and Hawkman wielding his mace that can absorb magic. That stuff was, like, really cool. But at the same time, there's zero introduction to this. So it's like, so as much as, like, I'm loving this, I know there's going to be someone sitting next to me who's going to be like, what the hell is happening here? Like, who's this Dr. Fate guy? Did, like, his helmet come from space? Why did that guy's mace transform? How did Atom Smasher get these abilities? More importantly, why is this, like, the second iteration of Atom Smasher? What happened with his father? There's all this stuff that could be explored, that could be interesting, but mostly gets sidelined. In particular, I feel really bad for Atom Smasher and Cyclone, because they're mostly just kind of looked down upon as, like, the interns of the Justice Society, and have, like, the briefest time to tell you their backstory. Like, they literally only have, like, about, like, a few seconds to get their backstory in between all the action that's going on here. And don't get me wrong, the action is actually pretty good. I actually really did like seeing Black Adam bust through walls and use his electric powers to zap Intergang, and then getting into fights with the Justice Society. All that stuff's pretty cool. But then it's one of those films that kind of, like, succumbs to, like, the superhero formula of realizing, look, when you get to the third act, you've got to have, like, everything come together with them fighting some big bad. And the villain they end up fighting is not all that interesting. It's just a demon called Sabak, who's summoned by this crown that was sought years ago. And, you know, one of the members of Intergang who was part of, like, the lineage of, like, the king who sought this crown finally puts it on, and he becomes a giant demon who Black Adam's got to fight. And the fight is not all that interesting, because it's not so much about outsmarting the demon or, you know, like, any character growth or anything like that. It's just a matter of, can Black Adam rip this guy in half? And I won't spoil it, but that's essentially all it amounts to. And it's a little bit frustrating, because here's the thing: if the film just wanted to be just, like, this mindless action piece of, you know, Black Adam fighting the Justice Society and then fighting a demon where they all team up together, it kind of works on that level, but it brings up all these more interesting aspects of, like, anti-imperialism, which, you know, does clash with what Amanda Waller was kind of, like, fighting for in the Suicide Squad. Here it kind of feels like the clunky version of, like, what James Gunn's Suicide Squad was doing with that aspect of, like, American exceptionalism. Here it's just kind of like, the Justice Society means well, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they're kind of working with Waller, because, like, okay, maybe Black Adam is violent, and we do kind of gotta contain him and not really go too much against the grain, which is really troubling, because, like, the only reason that they decide to side with Black Adam and try to, you know, like, work with him and get on his good side is just because there's a bigger threat. There's another big bad on the horizon who doesn't really take its final form until, I guess, like, the end of the second act, right on time for the third act. So it's very concerning. Like, I mean, and the thing is, like, I really do like Dwayne Johnson in the role of Black Adam. He has the perfect kind of, like, fish out of water, dry wit. Like, it's pretty clear they're going for, like, a Terminator 2 vibe here of having this character who doesn't understand, you know, after 5,000 years, you can't just go around killing people if you want to, you know, make the world better. Like, if you have all these powers, you don't have to kill them. So a little bit of a Terminator 2 edge there, but little aspects of that humor really works for this film. It's only when it's get lost in the weeds and doesn't give us enough time to expand on the characters that a lot of the character dynamic just kind of, it feels very artificial, where it doesn't come off like it should. It feels like there should be powerful moments between, like, Cyclone and Atom Smasher when they, you know, fear for their lives and what they're doing and question their place in the world, and it doesn't feel there. There are scenes where it's like there's a camaraderie between Dr. Fate and Hawkman where they're torn about sacrifice, and it feels like you should feel something more there, and it's just not there. It feels like there's a whole other film missing to kind of, like, blow up these characters and make us care more about them, instead of just being just nothing but superhero fights. Like, I think one of the reviews that I wrote for this was just, I think I just put in, like, the little subtitle, just, oops, all superhero fights. Because really that's that's kind of like the high point and the low point of the film. It's like, yes, you get lots of really cool superhero fights, and it is fun to see Black Adam like punch guys into the stratosphere. It's just that's kind of all you get, and by the time you see him like punch a man up into the clouds for like the fourth time, it kind of loses its impact. It's like, okay, this looks neat, but can you give me some meat here? Can you give me a little bit more to this story? And it almost kind of feels like that might have been part of like the runtime here. Like I think it's like right on the mark of like 2 hours, that it almost feels like something might have been trimmed out here, just because it should feel like there's a little bit more character here, but it feels like it was just get as much action in there as you can, get as much like, you know, chaos and destruction as you can. Although I should probably note, if you compare this to like Man of Steel, there's more superhero fights, and yet Kahndaq is still kind of in one piece, despite the fact that they're fighting a demon who literally summons the undead, and there's like cars toppling and zooming around, and there's energy explosions, and yet it still survives compared to Metropolis and Man of Steel. So, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it's a better film than like Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, but mostly because it sets its sights lower. And I guess when it sets its sights lower, it doesn't feel as bad when it doesn't like kind of like measure up to like being a bigger film about talking about imperialism, and legacy and destiny, which are all great topics, but are all kind of reduced to like the smallest conversations before they got to get back to punching the undead or a demon or sending like the next villain back to hell or something like that. And the other thing that kind of concerned me here, and I know this is probably going to sound a little bit nitpicky here, and this is definitely the heaviest spoiler moment here, but at the end of the film, everyone was talking about this because they thought it was like, you know, this is the world we live in right now. It's like it's all about cameos, so like people mostly just come to the film and stay for it just to see what will happen in the next film. And at the end of the film, we get we get Henry Cavill returning as Superman. Now, immediately when that happens, most people in the theater will like cheer. They'll be like, "Oh yay!" And they'll clap. Cavill's back. Which, don't get me wrong, I love Cavill as Superman, but at the same time, I'm questioning this scene because, okay, Superman got called in to handle Black Adam by Amanda Waller. So my thoughts are like, so what is Superman working with Waller now? Like, they briefly mentioned in the Suicide Squad that Superman went to the ICU because of Deadshot. Did that have something to do with it? I don't know. There's so many great aspects of this film that don't feel like they pay off well. Like, it would feel interesting if they could explain a little bit why Superman's working with Amanda Waller. Instead, it's just it just ultimately amps up to, you know, who's Black Adam gonna fight next. Because like when I got to the end of that scene between Superman and Black Adam, it just felt like, okay, they're gonna meet and they're probably gonna fight, even though Superman says like we should probably talk. Like, they're probably going to talk for a little bit and then just fight, right? I mean, that's that's the vibe that the whole film gives off here. So I'm very torn about the film. Like, on one level, it almost kind of feels like somebody like got like really, like a DC Comics fan got like really drunk, read through a whole bunch of JSA books and like read some of like the Black Adam stories and said, "Oh, I'm gonna make the most kick-ass film with like Black Adam and the Justice Society, and they're gonna fight in this town. We're gonna have Terminator 2 moments and all these cool little segments." I kind of admire the film on that level, but on another level, it's like, okay, but not all this connects. And by not connecting, I don't mean how it connects to like the DCEU. I really don't care how it connects. I really don't care that like Waller had the Justice Society in her pocket and didn't bring it out for Task Force X. That's fine. That's all fine. It's just that this film doesn't connect with everything that it's trying to set up, and a lot of which is strange because it does set its goals really small. And I do like some of the stuff that it's doing, but it never really matches up to like the big film that it could have been, which is kind of sad. So instead of getting like this great DC Comics film, we kind of just get a decent one with some great ideas that are never really explored, and we mostly just explore how hard that Black Adam can punch someone, which is really hard.